Hello everyone, my name is Kara Joswick, and today I will be talking about the resource I chose, which is hashtag clear the air. The reason I chose hashtag clear the air is because it is run solely by educators, and it uses multiple platforms including Twitter. It has a podcast with one episode, it has a WordPress website, and it also holds live Zoom conferences, but also includes the recordings of the Zoom conferences on their website. It is inclusive due to the fact that it is public on Twitter and anyone can join in on the conversation. And that brings me to my last point, which all are welcome to participate. So a little bit about this resource. Clear the Air sparked from a 2016 Twitter thread that was made to allow educators to discuss the current social issues. So in 2016, someone decided to go on Twitter and start up a conversation about the current social issue. Since Twitter is a public platform, this allowed anyone who was interested in the conversation to put in their input and their beliefs, and this just created this whole resource called Clear the Air, which allows people to address their beliefs, hold themselves accountable, and just learn from other perspectives. And then from this Twitter thread, they have it now expanded to posting on their WordPress website, which has a similar platform to the ones we've created with blogs, discussions, summaries, and other resources. And they also have their Zoom conferences, like I mentioned, and they've created a podcast on Spotify, and they have one episode currently discussing the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. It is quite easy to use. If you have Twitter, you can follow them and participate in the conversations, and their username is @cleartheairedu. Their website is linked below, and also their Spotify podcast. So Clear the Air's ideology is that community, learning, and dialogue are essential to personal and professional development. They also believe that they have the power and the responsibility to lay the foundations necessary to create a more just and equitable society. And they also believe that education is a vehicle for social change. When I read these, I agree completely. I plan on, when I get in the classroom, I plan to utilize all these and use resources like Clear the Air to spark new discussions and to really find new perspectives and new methods to teaching some of these difficult ideas, such as social issues and anti-racism, which can sometimes be hard to address. Their goals are to engage in public discourse because it allows us to live our values out loud. They invite others into the conversation and hold them lovingly accountable. Their goal is to create, curate, and provide free project-based support and resources for educators working towards collective liberation and justice in schools or communities. They also understand that we are on a lifelong journey and are committed to taking any steps that move us forward. They also support anti-racist school board member candidates, and they understand that this is a long-term goal. The goal that really sparked interest in me is understanding that we're in a lifelong journey. I love the idea that they know that this change isn't going to happen overnight, and just by having conversations each day here and there, being able to reflect on past conversations from past issues and comparing them to the issues we're having today, I think that's really encouraging, and I believe that it will allow us to really truly see the differences and the change we're bringing to society. Here I have 4 pictures, and what's unique about them is they have a graphic designer that basically creates these graphics that basically sum up all of the conversations they've had. So here we have 4 conversations that were sparked on Twitter, and basically the first one is white rage, white supremacy, and voter suppression, and how we got here. They have a conversation with Bryn Brown, conversations with Noli Rooks, and conversations with Jan Theodore Harris. So basically they take all the Twitter threads and the discussions from their guests, and they put in the key points so that if you want to see them, you can visit their website and get a basic summary of what they discussed that day. And I think that's really nice because it kind of puts a visual to a whole conversation. How can Clear the Air be utilized in the classroom? I believe that the conversations can spark new approaches to teaching about social issues. Like I said earlier, you may have a perspective that's completely different than someone else's. You might have different beliefs. So by having a conversation and learning from others, you can introduce new perspectives to your children so that they can choose what they want to believe. Or if they respond differently to different approaches, they will be able to utilize the one that helps them the most. Also, both the Twitter thread and the website provide hyperlinks to other useful resources such as articles, Zoom conferences with special guests, corresponding videos, and resources for children. The most useful, I would say, is the Twitter thread because that is where all of the educators come together and have these conversations and post links and really provide their input on the social issues and anti-racism conversations. Some of the highlights of Clear the Air are that they use multiple forms of multimedia. As I mentioned before, they have a podcast, they have a website, they have those graphics, they have the Twitter thread, and then from the Twitter thread, you have an array of so many different resources you can get from that. Also, you have the opportunity to inherit tons of new resources through the other educators, like I said earlier. I believe this is a unique resources that relies solely on conversation, and it allows educators to discuss whenever they want, and also to refresh on responses, and they get responses immediately if you refresh the page. These conversations are accessible to everyone, whether they choose to participate or not. So if someone goes on the Twitter thread and decides they just want to learn a little bit more, but they don't want to participate in the conversation, they don't have to. They can just view what other people are saying. This also allows teachers to address their own beliefs and learn from others and develop diverse perspectives to use in the classroom. And finally, it's free. Twitter is free for anyone over the age of 13, and the website is free to access as well as the podcast. Some pitfalls I found is that it's not very accessible to younger children. As I said before, Twitter is for children over the age of 13, and most of the conversations are accessed through Twitter. It may not be too easy to dig up past conversations. Depending on how big the thread is, you may have to scroll for a while to be able to find the conversation that interests you or may relate to the current curriculum you're teaching in the classroom. I think the biggest pitfall that I found is that since this is a public account, it can be prone to non-content related discussion. Anyone can post in the thread, and these posts can be negative and not display social justice or anti-racism. And finally, there's no direct classroom resources on their website or anything. You have to really click on the links and find the ones that work best. So my overall opinion of Clear the Air is that it's a great resource to connect with other educators. You have such a broad range of educators from probably all over the world since Twitter is used worldwide. So I think that's a great resource, and it's really good for finding new methods of teaching about social justice and social issues and anti-racism. And it's a great resource for just broadening your own perspective and becoming more diverse in your thought. Finally, it is driven by a passionate community. All these educators are obviously passionate about it because you have the choice to participate, and all these educators are deciding to participate, which shows that they're passionate about social issues and anti-racism. It is accessible to anyone. Anybody can access the website, the podcast, or the Twitter thread and participate if they choose so. Finally, the open conversation method allows for any interest or issue to be discussed. If something occurs on the news and there's a new social issue or there's a new problem in society, it can be immediately addressed on Twitter through their Twitter feed. Finally, my questions for you guys are, Number one, do you think that social media platforms like Twitter, in this case, are good resources for purposes like these? Or do you think that the platform makes pages like this too susceptible to non-content related discussion and possible negativity? My second question is, it is important to teach children from multiple perspectives. However, with such an open conversation and so many perspectives, how do you choose which are best to incorporate into the curriculum? And finally, Twitter requires users to be 13 or older to make an account. Do you think that children under this age should not be exposed to content like this, or should there be a platform welcoming them? I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and I hope you check out Clear the Air because it really is a very useful resource, and I believe that it can really enhance learning about social justice, social issues, and anti-racism. Thank you.